Okay, 1 second. I was waiting for it to. I have to turn the volume off over here. Otherwise. Okay. So let's get started. Let's see how to. Okay. All right. So let's pick it up from Bays. We saw the first one told us the general idea of this machlokes between the Rambam and the Bahag, and many others along the way about what is there a mitzvah to believe in Hashem or not, and the way that that the Tzemach Tzedek is understanding it is that really there's no machlokes about believing in it. This is really from, I think he quoted from the Abarbanel, who first said this idea, but he said it a little bit differently, al pi Kabbalah, and he's saying that there's no question that everybody agrees that belief in a Hashem it precedes the Torah and precedes all the mitzvos. The mitzvah of emunah is the mitzvah of what Hashem is. That Hashem is this entity that's shalem and the mailam in hachachma, and that the whole concept. However, to know and that Hashem is in the world and making the world live. So that just like we know that we have a neshama from the fact that we're alive, and that's not an inyan of emunah, that's just a knowledge. So that's the same thing that we know that Hashem exists, and that's not what the mitzvah of emunah is about. Okay, so now he's going to take this deeper now starting from base. Okay. Ach lahavit delachora yesh stira ledavrenu ele shanu omrim shemitzias Hashem ve'yoso mechaye ha'olam enu bechlal emuna ela bechlal bebechinas das mamish. So he says that l'chora there's a question on what I'm saying, because I just got through explaining how what I said, this idea of believing in Hashem. So no, it doesn't need emunah. That's just, we know that's just obvious. But he says there seems to be a mimer in the Zohar that seems to contradict this. Mimer hayadua bezohar deles machshava tfisa be klal. Right? There's a famous lashon in the Zohar that writes those words that no machshava can grasp Hashem. Right? No thought can possibly grasp Hashem. Meaning, we can't possibly know Hashem and understand Hashem. So I think maybe he's saying, so how could it be that that's what the mitzvah is? I'm not sure. Let's see. No, this is really not a problem with what I'm saying at all. That what we know of Hashem is, when we know Hashem, and it's something we know for sure, it's that he exists, but it doesn't mean that we know him and we understand him, right? Of course, about Hashem himself, like the Zohar says, less machshava tfisa beklal, there's no possibility of any thought of a human being to actually grasp Hashem, and that's the way the Rambam writes that a little bit differently, but that Hashem's, we know his mitzius, but not his mahus, right? Not his essence. Right? From what he does, we know that he exists, but we don't know who or what he actually is, right? All we can know from Hashem or about Hashem is based on how he interacts with us. So then we, reverse engineer, right? But based on how he acts, we can put together who or what he is, but we can't be'etzem know who or what Hashem is. Right? That's a pasuk in Eov, right? That is it possible for the mind of a choker, of a searching person? Is it possible to know Hashem, to find him? Okay. So now this concept that we're talking about now, where we can know something to be true and know it absolutely without understanding it and not being able to fully grasp it, right? This would also be understood from the same metaphor that we used earlier. Right? We know that we are animated by something, right? We know that there's some vitality inside of us, some life force, some nefesh, something that's giving us life. Right? We see ourselves live, right? Even though we're just flesh and blood. All we do is know that such a thing exists. We know that there's something that exists inside of me that is animating me, right? Right? He knows for sure, right? We know absolutely that there is something inside of me. There is some nefesh, something in there. But exactly like what he said about Hashem, right? But there's no way that we can know what it is and understand it, but we know it's there. And how it connects to our guf, how it like binds with our bodies and animates us the way it does, we don't even understand. Even though we know that it's in every single one of our ivarim. It's so interesting. He's sort of like proving scientifically the fact that our chiyus fills us up, right? Because as soon as we think of doing something, we do it. As soon as, right, there's no delay. There's no, like, it doesn't have to go through any sort of process. So that somehow, I don't get this exactly, but somehow that proves that this chiyus that's filling all of us is in all of us. Because look, he says v'ilu haya nefesh shora b'mocho v'libo levad, because if somehow like our consciousness was only in our heart and our head, umisham haya haratzon nimshach beregel va'oz tisnanea, and like it had to go through some sort of a system until it gets there, which really is the case, right? It goes through the nerves and stuff. It goes really fast, Haya tzarich lio shihias zman. Right, there would have to be a delay, which of course, like in reality, there is. It's milliseconds though. Zman bo sipuk lehiluch haratzon min hamoach laleiv, v'nachnu roem hefech zeh. Okay, so but we don't. His scientific proof is not so. I don't think anyway, unless I'm misunderstanding it. I don't know if it's actually accurate from the way, because we do understand it that way, meaning that I think scientifically the way we understand how my finger moves is it starts with a thought in my brain and it goes through my spinal cord, through the nervous system, through the neurons to my finger, and that is, and there actually is a delay. It's delayed in milliseconds. So in his time, that was not, they didn't know there was such a thing as milliseconds yet, so to him, it seemed like everything was immediate, and therefore that indicates that there's life in my fingers also, right? There's like my nefesh is obviously animating my finger because, my whole body moves whenever I want it to. Okay, I'm getting it. That doesn't like take away or anything from the argument, but I don't know if the scientific metaphor really fits properly. Okay, right? But no, we see it's immediate. As soon as a person thinks, his foot moves, right? I mean, he's right. Yes, I mean there are nerve cells, right? The cells that it's like connected directly to the brain. If you look at the nervous system as sort of like housing the nefesh, so to speak, right? The way that we function, right? But still, it does travel in direct. It's like direct. Okay. So we see that it's obvious that the nefesh is completely infused through the whole body into all the parts of the body. We don't understand how that happens. How my body houses and clothes my soul. And not only how, but what my nefesh is, certainly we don't know. Okay, so but his point is still intact and fully understandable, right? That we all agree that there's a concept of knowing something without really being able to understand it, right? So he's telling us that's how we view ourselves, that that it's obvious that there's something animating us, that we experience that's there, and yet we don't know what that is. And so too, that's the way that we can know Hashem without understanding Hashem. Okay. Ukamokein hu yisparach hu hayadua mitziuso she'anachnu neda sheyesh borei makor hachayim hamachayu mahave ha'olam. So we know that there is such a thing. We know there is this source of life and this source of everything. Aval mahuso eino noda, but what that is, we don't know. Its essence, we can't possibly know. And that's where the Zohar makes that comment that we can't wrap our minds around God. That means we can know God exists absolutely without being able to understand who He is. Ratzalomer lahakir bahuso mamish shezeh eno musag l'shum nivra ba'olam k'dichsiv uponai lo yiro. Like Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe said, "Hareini nad rakecha," Hashem said, "I could only show you like from behind, but my face you will not see." Right? Meaning a human cannot know God. Okay. V'hine das b'lashon haTorah hu hamora al davar yedias hametzios. Okay, so when we're talking in the Torah, like in Torah, language, and we want to discuss what does it mean to know something, to know what the situation is. So that's called das. Aval al hasagas hamahus nofel lashon re'iyah. But to know something deeper, to understand something deeper, that we call in the Torah seeing. Okay, so he's going to explain this to us, right? That these two concepts, even though like maybe you would have thought it's the opposite, that seeing is more surface and das is more penetrating and more understanding, but the way he's explaining to us, it's the opposite. So I just want to make sure we don't get confused. So das, the concept of das, is knowing the mitzvos, like knowing something exists, right? So we know Hashem exists, right? But we don't see Him, right? We don't understand what that means. We don't understand the essence of Hashem, which would be seeing Him, right? That's what. Our eyes, our vision, that's the tool that we use to understand the world, right? To understand the essence of things. We look at them and we understand them. So to see something means to understand it. To know it means to know its existence, but to see it means to understand it. Okay. V'hadas hu hasagas hametzios, right? And again, das is the lower level, or the other level of just knowing that it exists. Right? So earlier when he said that from my flesh I can see Hashem, right? Meaning that it's obvious that there's something in I thought maybe he didn't actually. Did he talk about this before? Yeah, no, he did, right? The previous page. Right? You quoted this pasuk, right? So he's saying the word echazeh is used because it means seeing, but it's seeing in Aramaic. The word the translation of re'iyah is chazeh, like to see something. So using the word in Aramaic, the achorayim shel re'iyah. So achorayim is the concept of like the lower level of that thing, meaning it's not actual re'iyah. It doesn't say mibsarei roa elokim, right? That would mean understanding the mahus. Right, so it doesn't use the word re'iyah, it uses the word echezeh, which is perceiving it, but that's not this deeper level. It's the targum, it's the acharayim, right? It's using like a lower level of seeing to denote a lower level of understanding. Ki hare'iyah hi hasagas hamahus, v'hadas hu hasagas hametzias. Ulefi shebelo kus lo yitachin hasagas hamahus el yadias hametzias bilvad l'chein nemar echezeh targum la'acharayim shal re'iyah. Right? It can't say mibsarai Hashem, because that would mean that we understood it. So no, it can't say So it uses the targum and achurayim. Again, achurayim means like the lower level of something, the back of it, like the lower level of it. We'll see later in this piece where he talks about this more, but the fact that it's in Aramaic, which is a lower level than Lashon HaKodesh, and the fact that it's this lower language is used because re'iyah would mean a deeper understanding. V'cheinu pirish har'esa ladas ki Hashem hu Elokim. Again, it doesn't say here now you see, right? It's har'esa ladas, ki Hashem hu Elokim. Klomar inyan zeh Hashem hu Elokim tuchel lo hagiu bebechinas das mamish. Right, we can know it for sure. V'hu imus chazak kimo hari'iyah mamish. Right, it's like seeing it. Shemashe eno masig mahuso eno shum rifyon veshinui bechozek amitis birur b'tziuso. Right, the fact is saying it's her esaladas, because the fact that we don't understand it does not take away one iota of our knowledge of it. Right, meaning that we know it to be 1,000,000% is not lost at all from the fact that we can't understand it at all. Right, and that's why it uses this lashon of her esaladas, right? It's almost as if seeing it, right? Because he knows it to be so clear. Like we said earlier about how the body is, filled with nefesh. Right, but this is like the really understanding Hashem, right? That's what we're going to have in Olam Haba. That's like the ultimate tainug, the ultimate, possible delight is when a person could actually understand Hashem. V'zuhi mailas hanavim shner bar bahem v'yar elav Hashem. Hashem appeared to them, right? So they gained some nowhere near a full understanding, of course, but compared to us, right, relative to us, to a non-Navi, what a Navi received from Hashem was like a piece of understanding, right? A piece of understanding Hashem way, way deeper than we possibly could, right? So relative to us, it's a re'iyah. But in La'asid Lavo and Olam Haba, that's what we're all going to have. We're all going to see Hashem, meaning we're all going to understand Hashem in that deepest way. Right, the language of the Navi and Yeshaya is that all flesh is going to see Hashem. We're going to see Hashem together. Ayin ba'ayin yir'u, another pasuk, right? We're going to eye to eye. We're going to see Hashem. So he's explaining to us why that lashon of seeing is so significant, because that means the deepest form of understanding, and that's what's going to be, right? When the time comes and Lasad Lavo and Hashem reveals himself, and it's the time of the Gilui of Yichud. So we're all going to see Hashem's essence in a way that we can't now. Kenoda umikol makom yuchol kol maskil al davar lehisanek tainu ba'otzum v'nifla merov kol b'yediah zu sheyitzayir b'daito yichud Hashem yisbarach alpha pi shelo hizik mahuso. Right, but still a person can come to tremendous tainug, even though the ultimate tainug is getting that deep understanding of Hashem. But still, a person recognizing this about Hashem and knowing this deeply gives a person a deep sense of pleasure, a deep sense of tainug, even though we don't really yet understand his mahus. Right, like a wealthy person, just knowing that his gems are somewhere, it could be it's in a safe in a different country, right? But just knowing that those gems are there, makes him very, very happy, even though he doesn't see them right now, right? So the same thing, a person knowing this about Hashem, even though we can't fully grasp it now, but knowing that we're going to, that itself is a tainug, right? Okay, L'Likutei Amarim Perek Lamed Gimel, so that he quotes very often, where like the Sefer Tanya, L'Likutei Amarim Tanya, where he'll talk about similar ideas. So he says in Perek Lamed Gimel, he says something similar to this. Okay, so what he established for us now is two things that we just saw today. Number one, this idea that how Hashem infuses the world with life, so that's something that we can know even though we can't understand it. And this idea of knowing something without understanding it, so like we see in ourselves from the fact that we have a nefesh that gives us life, we know it's there even though we don't understand it. And then he explained to us that there's two words that are used, and that based on where they're, which word is used, it means something very different about what we can know about Hashem. There's the idea of knowing Hashem, da'as, and that's knowing he exists. But then this concept of seeing, that's understanding on a deeper level. That's grasping Hashem, is mahus, his essence in some way, which now we can't really do. Nevi'im, we're able to do that to some degree, but la'asid lavo, that's what we're all going to do. And that's why there, it's always the lashon of re'iyah is used, because seeing Hashem means, really understanding who he is. Okay, let's try to go a little more. Yeah, you have time? You have time to go more?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay. V'hine hadas hu hanikra bezohar maftecha the kolil shis. Okay, so in the Zohar, the das is called the key of the six. Dahainu shu pnimius hamidos. Okay, but this is something that's important to understand. Now he's talking here both, Kabbalistically, but he's also talking here sort of psychologically. So we just have to understand just a little bit about this. But okay, so the way that the way the 10 spheros are broken up, we know, what I'm gonna try to there's like a white screen, right? A whiteboard, right? So I'm gonna use this for a minute. So right, the way the 10 spheros, the way that they're broken up. So there's the top three. It usually starts with Keser at the top, and then you've got Chachma and Bina. Right? Those are called the Mochin. Those are called like the brains. That's like the head, and that's where like things exist only in theory, and in not, that's like much higher levels. The next six are sort of where the main action happens, where the main hanhagos of Hashem exist, and that's where we have Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod, right? So that's a group of six together, right? And that's like where the hanhaga of Hashem happens, right? These are all like the ways that we refer to how Hashem interacts with us, with Chesed, with Din, with Rachamim, Netzach, Hod. Okay, those are them. And then Malchus, which is the 7th or the 10th, right? The 10th from the top, or the 7th from here, right? The Malchus, that's like coming out into the world. That's the actual happening of the thing, of whatever is going to happen. So if Hashem is doing something in the world, so the concept of it happens up here in the Mochin, like the planning, the idea, the concept of it. The actual bringing it out, Lamaisa, takes place in these 6 midos. And then the 7th, the Malchus, that's the actual coming out into the world. Okay, now sometimes Keser is not included because Keser is considered like part of the previous world, and Keser is too high. Keser is called Ayin, it's called nothing yet. And Chachma is the first place that's like Yesh Me'ayin, right? It's the first one. So sometimes we count it not from Keser, but we start with Chachma, and we have Chachma over here, Bina over here, and then we have what's called Da'as over here. Right, and that's where Chabad comes in. Chabad is Chachma, Bina, Da'as, Chet, Beis, Dalid, right? So when we look at Da'as, so then Da'as is sort of like the spinal cord. Da'as is like what brings down what Chachma and Bina are planning and thinking. It sort of comes down through Da'as, and it's the Da'as sort of is like the spinal cord that brings all of the shefa down through the rest of the midos. Okay, that's basically the idea, that sometimes we don't look at Keser and we look at the 10 midos starting from Chachma, and in that, Das is always there, but we don't always count it as a sphera. Well, it's not for now. Why sometimes we count Keser and sometimes Das. But the idea that the concept of Das is the bringing down of the Shefa, the bringing down of whatever the idea that Hashem is working with, and that's what like sort of animates the midos as it brings the Shefa downwards. So that's what he's saying over here. The idea that Das, I'm going to shut this off now, that Das is the key to the 6, right? Because without the Das bringing down whatever Shefa is going to come down, so the 6 midos can't be activated, right? So Das is sort of like the activator of the midos, but psychologically you understand this also, because a person's Das is sort of like their understanding, their way of seeing things in the world. And and the way a person is going to act, if they're going to act with chesed, if they're going to act with din, if they're going to act nicely or not, it's based on the way they see the world, right? So a person's das is the key to their midos also, right? You know what I'm saying? In other words, like the same idea Kabbalistically discussing the shefa and all of that is really analogous exactly to the way a person works, right? That your thoughts and deeper ideas and ritzonos, that's like your mochin, that's like the chachma and the bina and the keser, but the das is sort of like the actual point of view that we have, our perspective, and it's our perspective that animates all the rest of the midos, right? So that's what he's saying here. Hadas hu anikra bezohar maftecha the kalil shis. It's like one key that unlocks the six, right? Because all those dahainu shehu pnimius amidos, right? Since das is like the pnimius, it's all the midos are only getting fed, so to speak, from what's coming down from the das. Kamosha anu omim sha'amidos betelim b'nimshachim achar hadas. But like we know how people act, right? Based on a person's das, what their perspective is, that's how they're going to act. Ki adam yodea umargish es atzmo harei anu roim b'chush shelafishu margish es atzmo b'chiyuso me'od azay midosav mispalim b'hispilus rav lehov atova lisno hara yoser. Right, when a person is very, it was a long sentence, I wasn't sure where to stop it, but it's basically we're saying where a person is very alive, right, when he feels himself strongly, so then he gets very animated about things, he gets very worked up about things, right, because when his das is animated and activated, so then all of his midos, the way he's going to function, is going to be animated. However, when a person is not like that, a person doesn't feel himself so much, his das is elsewhere, he's distracted, right? He's distracted by something, he's very weighed down by something else. He's not really in himself so much. So he doesn't get so worked up by things, not in a positive way or in a negative way. So he's just explaining how, right, the concept of a person's das is what animates all the rest of their midos. Whatever the midos they have are, but they act in whatever way they act. There's a range, but it's the das that's what's animating the person and deciding which midah is going to come out and be utilized over here in this situation. Okay. Nimtza shamidos nigrorim achar hadas shu har hargasha kanal kanizkar le'el. Right. So the midos follow the feeling, right, of a person, his feeling, how he feels about a situation. V'lachein nikra mafteach leshisha hamidos. Right, chesed gvura tferes netzach hod yesod kamo hamafteach sheposeach hispailus hamida umaora osora al yedei shemasiach daito. Right, so he's going back and forth between Kabbalah and psychology, right? But but he's saying the same idea that the das is what animates a person. It's what animates what midos are going to be at play and to what degree and how strongly are they going to express themselves. And with the midos of Hashem, lahavdil, that's exactly the same thing. It's an exact analogy that the das is the shefa that's coming down into the midos, and that's what's going to determine how each one of those midos are going to be activated and animated by Hashem, right? V'sharsho nimshach. Okay, maybe we'll stop over here because the next piece is like much more Kabbalistic. I need to give like a little bit of an introduction, and I hear there's like a lot of people coming home now, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do it. So let's stop. We'll stop over here, and then because the next piece is actually like technical Kabbalah, so we have to give a little intro. Okay, good, excellent. Okay, but I'm happy that we went further a little bit.
Yeah, same. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Shavua Tov. Have a great week.
Yeah, you too. I guess we'll be in touch about when to do
it.
Yeah,
we'll be in touch.